If you ever hear soft giggles in the middle of the night, coming from the ceiling above you, what would you do? Look up or run? This is the story of a sealed room, a floating head under the full moon, and a secret no one dares to unearth. A legend once thought to belong only in old folklore, now reborn in the heart of modern Malaysia. If you're drawn to bizarre and chilling legends, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video. Because tonight, we're not just telling a story, we're unlocking a memory. Room 308. If you ever hear a woman laughing from the ceiling in the middle of the night, would you dare look up? In 2019, in the quiet town of Kuala Pilla, Negeri Sembilan, Malaysia, stood a decades-old female dormitory built in the 1970s for nursing students. It was known as Asrama Puteri Sri Mawar, once home to hundreds of young women. But since 2015, Block C, especially Room 308, had been sealed off for reasons no one could explain. Everything might have remained quiet until a student named Aina moved in at the beginning of September 2019. Aina, 21, was a final-year practical nursing student. Due to a shortage of rooms, she was temporarily placed in Block C, which had long been abandoned. It's just superstition. She laughed off the warnings from her classmates about the Penanggalan, a bloodthirsty flying head spirit from Malay folklore, said to prey on postpartum women and those who've had abortions. At first, everything seemed normal. Room 308 smelled a bit musty, but it was clean. Aina moved in with her quiet but kind roommate, Farah. They made the space cozy with photos, fairy lights, and scented sprays. The first week passed peacefully, but on the 8th night, everything changed. Tuesday, September 17th, to 13 a.m., Aina was awakened by a faint dripping sound. She sat up and looked around. Farah was fast asleep in the bed beside hers, but the sound persisted. Drip, drip, drip. It seemed to come from the ceiling. She turned on her phone's flashlight and looked up. Nothing but old cement. But then she noticed something chilling. A damp patch directly above Farah's bed, with a thin trickle running down. Aina whispered, "Farah, wake up. I think a pipe is leaking." Farah opened her eyes and said something strange. "That's not water, it's blood." The next morning, Aina called maintenance. A technician came to inspect the ceiling but found no leak, no moisture, nothing unusual. Probably just a bad dream. He shrugged. But from that day on, Aina began to notice something odd about Farah. She slept during the day and stayed awake at night. Her eyes grew sunken. Her skin turned pale. She always wore her hijab tightly wrapped, never revealing her neck. At meals, she avoided garlic and drank coconut water, something she used to hate. Then came the 11th night. Aina had a late hospital shift and returned to the dorm well past midnight. When she opened the door to room 308, the window was wide open, the curtains fluttering, and the air was thick with the pungent, metallic smell of fresh blood. Farah was gone. Just as Aina was about to call out for her, a soft sound echoed from the ceiling above. He. A woman's laugh. Thin, raspy, like it came from a throat without a body. Aina didn't sleep that night. She curled up in the corner, lights on, phone clutched tightly in hand. Near 3 a.m., Farah returned. But what Aina saw through the window chilled her to the core. Farah's reflection had no head. Yet when the door opened, Farah walked in, looking completely normal. Except for one thing. Her collar was soaked in dried blood. The next morning, Aina decided she couldn't stay in room 308 any longer. She went to the dorm office to request a transfer. But when she brought it up, the staff exchanged glances in uneasy silence. After a tense pause, an elderly warden called her into a private room. She spoke in a low voice. Room 308 was the site of something terrible. 4 years ago, a student named Zahira lived there. Rumor had it she was practicing an ancient form of black magic. They called it ilmu Penanggalan. She would lock herself in every night and cover her head during the day. Then one morning, she vanished. All they found was a trail of blood stretching from her bed up to the ceiling. Since then, the room has been sealed. Aina swallowed hard, then asked, "Then, who is Farah?" The warden looked her straight in the eyes and gave a single reply, one that froze Aina to her core. "Farah is registered as a new student, but in our records, she doesn't exist." The smell of blood and the mirror's reflection. Have you ever seen someone in the mirror, but when you turned around, they were no longer there? After the unsettling conversation with the dorm warden, Aina left the office in a daze. She hurried back to room 308, her mind racing. No records of Farah. What did that mean? She wasn't officially staying here. Or had she never existed at all? That night, Aina decided to try something. She placed a small vintage mirror on her desk, angled toward Farah's bed. She wanted to test an old superstition, that Penanggalan spirits cannot be seen in mirrors. Around 2:45 a.m., Aina pretended to sleep, watching the reflection out of the corner of her eye. Outside, the wind howled, pulling at the curtains. The room was eerily still. Then she saw it. In the mirror, her own bed, occupied. Farah's bed, empty. Aina turned her head. Farah was still there, lying with her back turned, blanket pulled over her head. But in the mirror, there was nothing. The next morning, Aina went straight to the campus library. She dug through old archives for reports of disappearances or unexplained deaths tied to Asama Puteri Sri Mawar. After more than 2 hours of searching, she found a short news clipping in Utusan, Malaysia, dated August 12, 2015. A nursing student named Zahira Mode Azman, 22, was reported missing from Sri Mawar dormitory in the early hours of August 10th. Her room showed signs of blood stains on the walls and ceiling. Police suspect supernatural involvement. Zahira. Aina's heart sank. That was the girl the warden had spoken of. What made her blood run cold was this. Zahira and Farah shared the same sharp eyes, the same small mouth, the same pale skin. Saturday, September 21st, 1:30 a.m. Aina stayed awake at her desk, a new journal open in front of her. She documented every strange event, the dripping from the ceiling, the headless silhouette in the window, the mirror with no reflection. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A soft click came from the window latch. She turned her head. The window had somehow opened, despite being locked since that afternoon. A gust of wind blew in, thick with the coppery stench of blood. Grabbing her flashlight, she stepped toward the window. But just as she reached for it, her light swept across the glass, and two eyes stared back at her. Not from a face, but floating, suspended in the air. Aina screamed and slammed the window shut. When she turned around, Farah was standing in the middle of the room. She said nothing, just stared at Aina, then spoke softly. "You saw it, didn't you?" Her voice was deep, distorted, like to people speaking at once. Aina backed away, heart pounding. Who are you?" Farah didn't answer. She slowly raised her hand and pulled off her hijab. Underneath, nothing. No neck, no throat, only a gaping, oozing hole where a head once belonged. Aina fainted. When she came to, it was morning. The room was empty. The mirror lay shattered across the floor, and on Farah's bed, a dark, dried blood stain, perfectly circular, as if something had perched there all night. Aina no longer had doubts. Whoever had been living with her wasn't human. She moved out of Block C the very next day. But before she left, she tucked a handwritten note under the pillow in room 308. It read, "I don't know who you are or who you used to be, but if you're still here, I hope you find your way back. I won't tell anyone. Just don't come looking for me." It should have ended there. But 3 weeks later, while Aina was on the night shift in the maternity ward at Seremban General Hospital, a woman was rushed in after childbirth, suffering from severe blood loss, despite no visible wounds. What alarmed everyone was this: the woman's eyes were wide open, and she kept muttering, "Penanggalan, Penanggalan. Look at the ceiling. It's still flying." Aina froze. Her mind snapped back to that first night in room 308. She slowly looked up and saw the hospital ceiling, damp and red, a stain spreading outward. Drip, drip, drip. The crimson tongue and the woman in the rubber trees. If one night you find yourself lost in a rubber tree forest and see a woman standing upside down, would you dare call her name? After that fateful night shift at Seremban Hospital, Aina began to have recurring nightmares. In every dream, she found herself in a room soaked in dim red light, with a head floating mid-air, its bulging eyes unblinking, its crimson tongue dangling and dripping blood onto the cold tile floor. One night, she woke up to find a bloody handprint on her window, even though her room was on the 3rd floor. October 12th, 2019, Aina returned to her hometown of Kampong Jemapo, about a 30-minute drive from Kuala Pila. She took a week off school, citing health reasons. But in truth, a creeping fear had begun to grow in her chest. The Penanggalan might be following her. Aina's grandmother, Makja, was one of the last people who still held knowledge of ancient folk traditions. She had once been a bomo, a female spirit medium, and now lived alone on the edge of a sparse rubber plantation. After listening to Aina's story, Makja was silent for a long time. Then she said one thing: "You brought it back with you, Aina. It's clinging to your soul." That night, Makja performed a cleansing ritual. She burned bouquet pods, scattered salt and limau puret leaves around Aina. The smoke was sharp, choking, but warm. As Aina sat with her eyes closed, she heard something faint, a strange whooshing sound, like wings, but not feathers. Heavy, wet, flesh. Makja's eyes snapped open, sharp as a blade. "It's here, but it can't come in. I'm still alive." The next morning, Aina followed her grandmother deep into the rubber forest. Makja stopped at a blackened tree, scorched from an old lightning strike. She spoke in a low voice. Here, in 1967, a woman was burned alive by the villagers. They said she was a Penanggalan. At night, people saw her head detach from her body, entrails glistening in the moonlight. By morning, her husband's body was found drained of blood, pale as wax. Aina shivered. She crouched beside the old tree and touched the charred soil. Instantly, her hand burned, a searing, pulsing heat. And in that moment, she heard a whisper, soft as wind through the leaves, "Don't look up." That night, Aina couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch of Makja's house, watching the moon. The rubber trees stood silently before her, swaying gently in the breeze. Then, she saw it, a figure gliding between the trunks, a woman in white, long hair flowing, barefoot. But something was wrong. Her hair hung forward, as if her head was on backward. Aina stood, breath caught in her throat. She heard the slow crunch of leaves under bare feet, and a wet slurping sound, like a tongue dragging across bark. Makja came out, holding a pouch of salt and a small mirror. She whispered, "Don't speak. Don't move. It won't see you if you don't meet its eyes." But Aina, as if in a trance, turned her head. The woman now stood at the bottom of the steps, but she had no body, only a floating head, entrails swaying like red seaweed in the wind. Its eyes locked with Aina's, and its mouth slowly curled into a smile. Makja shouted an incantation and threw a handful of salt straight at it. A piercing screech shattered the night. The head burst into flame, sizzling like acid, and vanished into the darkness. Aina collapsed, and just before the world went black, she heard her grandmother whisper in her ear, "That wasn't Farah, and it's no longer Zahira either. That thing is a spirit without memory. It hunts for a new body, the blood pact and the spirits of the unborn. If you ever hear the sound of a baby crying in the middle of the night, make sure someone in the house isn't pregnant." After her face-to-face encounter with the floating head in the rubber forest, Aina became quieter. She no longer smiled as often. Her eyes were always tired, alert. But what haunted her most was Makja's final warning. "It's looking for a new body." A phrase that once seemed cryptic now held terrifying weight. October 17th, 2019. In the small kitchen of Makja's wooden house, Aina flipped through an old leather-bound notebook her grandmother called Kitabil Mulama, a tome of ancient folk sorcery. Among its yellowed pages, one passage caught her eye. Written in flowing Jawi script, it was underlined in what looked like dried blood. Penanggalan tidak dilahirkan, ia dibuat, melalui perjanjian darah, wanita itu menyerahkan nyawa bagi kekuasaan. Tetapi dia harus makan janin yang tidak berdosa. Translation: the Penanggalan is not born, it is made. Through a blood pact, a woman offers her soul in exchange for power. But in return, she must feed on the unborn. Aina shuddered. The blood-drained mothers, the terrified women post-birth. They weren't coincidences. October 18th night shift, Sremban Hospital. Aina returned to work. But this time, she had a different mission. She was assigned to the maternity ward, just after a difficult delivery. The patient, Sama, was unconscious, suffering from severe blood loss despite a successful birth. Her husband, Izzat, sat by the bed, eyes full of worry. Aina checked the charts. No hemorrhaging, no complications. But as she stepped out to get water, she heard something. A baby crying, high-pitched, far away, coming from the end of the hallway. From the restroom, she walked slowly toward it. The door was ajar. Inside, pitch black. No one in sight. On the floor, a shimmering pool of red liquid. And in the center, a tiny footprint, bare, three-toed. Aina backed away. Suddenly, the hallway lights began to flicker, and from the darkness came a whisper, "I'm hungry." She ran back to the nurse's station, grabbing a handheld mirror, then returned to Sama's room. Quietly, she held up the mirror to the bed. Sama lay motionless, asleep, but in the mirror, a shadow hovered above her. A bald head, skin torn and rotting, with red intestines swaying beneath it, sniffing around the mother's abdomen. Aina threw a white cloth into the air and began chanting a protective verse Makja had taught her. The creature let out a shrill scream, thrashed, then vanished. The next morning, Aina resigned from the hospital. She knew if she stayed, she'd be next. But what she didn't realize was, she had already been marked. October 19th returned to Ayasama Puteri Sri Mawar. Aina went back to room 308. Not to live, but to end it. She brought salt, a mirror, coconut oil, and Makja's ancient tome. The room greeted her like a crypt. Dry, cold air, tinged with iron and mold. She sat cross-legged on the floor, lit a white candle, began the sealing ritual. But just as she neared the end, the window burst open. A violent gust snuffed the candle, and from the ceiling, it appeared, a floating head, eyes glowing red. The Penanggalan spoke. "I was Zahira. I just wanted to live. You stole my food." Aina screamed. "You're already dead. You're no longer human." The creature shrieked and lunged. Aina threw salt into the air. The mirror shattered as it collided with the spirit. Flames erupted from the center of the room, climbing the walls, Aina collapsed, and everything went dark. When she awoke, the room was silent. No flames, no blood, no Penanggalan, only a charred circle scorched into the floor, and a single message, etched in black ash on the wall: "I will return when blood flows again." The girl without a shadow and the whisper in the womb. If you ever see someone walking under the sun without casting a shadow, don't speak to them. Don't go near. After the final night in room 308, Aina officially withdrew from school. She left the dormitory for good and moved in with Makja. But even miles away from that cursed place, the signs never stopped. Birds that flew past the house would shed their feathers mid-air and fall dead at the doorstep. The lights flickered for no reason. And some nights, in the bathroom mirror, Aina would glimpse a woman in white passing behind her, even when she was home alone. One morning, Makja took Aina to the village market. While her grandmother browsed for vegetables, Aina stood beside a stall when she noticed a young woman nearby. She wore a long white baju kurung, hair loose down her back, standing only a few steps away, facing the other direction. Aina glanced down instinctively. No shadow. The girl stood in the midday sun, but beneath her feet, there was nothing. Just pale dust, like her shadow had been blown away. Aina turned away, pretending not to notice. But as she left the market, she could feel it. Eyes watching her from behind, heavy and cold, like a gust of winter wind on a summer day. That night, Aina told Makja everything. Her grandmother sighed deeply, her eyes darker than usual. "It hasn't let you go," she said. "You're carrying part of its soul. That's the mark of the Dadarasuk, the possessed. It doesn't need a body. It needs a gate back into the world." Aina's breath caught. A gate. Makja nodded and poured herbal water into a clay bowl. A woman preparing to become a mother, or one who can. That body is its way back. And you, Aina, you were the last person to see it. October 24th, midnight. Aina jolted awake, drenched in sweat. She had dreamt of herself, pregnant, belly unnaturally large. Inside the dream, something tapped softly from within her womb. Thump, thump, thump. And then, a voice, whispering from deep inside. "Don't be afraid. Let me stay." Aina rushed for medical tests the next morning. All results negative. She wasn't pregnant, never had been. But on the ultrasound, the doctor paused, then turned the screen toward her. In the bottom corner, a small, round, black blur. Not a fetus, not a cyst. Might just be interference, the doctor muttered, clearly unsure. Aina said nothing, but she knew. It was already inside her. The calling ritual. Makja decided to perform one of the oldest forbidden rites. Penanggalan Bayungan, the shadow calling. A ceremony to summon the spirit within the possessed and seal it. At midnight, Aina sat in a circle of salt. Mirrors placed all around. Candles flickered. Makja sprinkled turmeric powder and lime juice around her, chanting in an ancient tongue. The room began to tremble. Wind swept through, though all windows were shut. Aina clutched her stomach. A coldness spread through her abdomen, like something was spinning inside her. Then, she opened her mouth, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. "Don't send me back. Don't make me return to that place. Blood is what binds me here." The voice was young, sweet, but distorted, echoing like it came from the bottom of a well. Aina's eyes rolled back. Her body twitched violently. Makja shouted an incantation, splashing water onto her face. Then, the mirrors trembled. In the reflection, the floating head returned. But this time, two faces overlapped. Zahira and a newborn girl, both mouths screaming, both sets of eyes layered with unspeakable pain. Aina screamed and collapsed. By morning, she awoke in bed. The room was calm. No salt, no candles, no trace of the ritual. Only a single folded note, placed on the table, handwritten, in red ink joy. When the final full moon of the month rises, blood will flow again. If I am not sealed away, I will no longer be one. I will be many. The full moon night and the room that never locks. If there's a room that's always locked, but one night, you see its door slightly open, don't go inside. Not everyone who enters comes back out. October 31st, 2019, the final full moon of the month. Aina returned to Kuala Pilla. No one knew why, not even her. There was only one truth. It was calling her. For nights on end, she dreamed the same thing. A blood-red moon hanging above the sky. Room 308 wide open, and the sound of crying infants echoing through the cold, empty corridors. Makja didn't stop her. Before Aina left, she handed her a small glass vial filled with rooster's blood, a handful of salt, and just one sentence. If the door is open, there's only one way to make it close again. 20 to 46 Gate of Ayasama Puteri Sri Mawar. Aina stepped silently through the rusted gate. Block C lay in darkness, its walls devoured by vines and decay. And yet, the door to room 308 stood ajar. No sound, only the crunch of dry leaves underfoot, and a faint red stain stretching from the doorway into the room. She stepped inside, but the air inside didn't feel abandoned. The room was dimly lit, as if someone had just left. On the desk, an open notebook, a pen, uncapped, and a cream-colored headscarf, exactly like Farah's. Aina looked around. On the bed, a figure lay motionless, blanket pulled up over its head, chest gently rising and falling. She approached slowly. Her hands trembled as she pulled the blanket back. Nothing. Just pillows. Still warm. Then, SLAM. The door shut itself. A mirror shattered. A candle lit in the center of the room, though no one had touched it. And from the air, it came. The floating head. But this time, it wasn't just Zahira. There was Farah, Sama, and dozens of other women's faces twisted together, crying, writhing, whispering. Aina screamed. She hurled the vial of rooster blood into the air. The faces recoiled, shriveling in pain, flames igniting within their hearts. Aina recited the final incantation, clenched a fistful of salt, and cast it onto the trail of blood. Flames erupted, engulfing the room. She collapsed, and as her vision faded, she saw them. The spirits, dozens of them, slowly stepping forward, not in anger, but with sorrow that ran deeper than death. Among them, Zahira knelt beside her, gently placed a hand on Aina's forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for remembering us." November 1st, 2019 morning. Firefighters were called to the dormitory after someone reported smoke rising from Block C. Room 308 was burned to ash, but no body was found. Only a half-burned circle of salt on the floor, and a leather notebook. Inside, the first page bore a handwritten warning. If you are reading this notebook, remember, never sleep in room 308. Even if the door is open, lock it. 2 months later, the dormitory reopened. A first-year student, unaware of the past, was placed in Block C due to space shortages. She laughed at the tales of flying heads. The first thing she brought into the room was a small mirror for the wall. That night, she texted her new roommate, "The room's great, but the reflection in the mirror is weird. There's a shadow, but it's not me." Her roommate replied, "What do you mean?" And the last message she ever sent, "I looked up, and the shadow smiled." Room 308 remains unlocked, but no one dares to lock it anymore. Room 308 is just an empty room now. But if one night you pass by and the door slowly creaks open, remember this: not everyone who steps inside comes out whole. The Penanggalan is not dead. It's simply waiting for the next one. You're still here, brave one. Subscribe if you crave the untold. Like the video of headless shadows make your skin crawl. And comment below if you were Aina. What would you have done?